Ave Maris Stella.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican II in a Year. I am your host, Father Matthew Schneider. I am a priest with Legionaries of Christ and I teach theology. This is a podcast on the StarQuest Production Network at sqpn.com. Today we are on day 329 and we're covering Gaudium et Spes, number 48 on the nature of marriage. If you want to follow along, we have a reading plan and more details at sqpn.com/Vatican or frmatthewlc.com/Vatican. Yesterday, we began part 2, and we started chapter 1, fostering the nobility of marriage in the family. The summary yesterday was moving from human dignity to application, and noting the issues around marriage that need addressing. Today, we'll continue chapter 1, and our summary is that God made marriage a firm commitment, blessed as a sacrament, and asked love between couples and between them and their children. So, paragraph 48, which is our number for today, has 5 subparagraphs, and we'll read it in 3 parts. A talks about how marriage is a firm commitment that God fortifies. B and C talk about how Jesus blessed us with marriage and makes himself known through it. D and E talk about how parents need to love their children and children love their parents. So let's begin with 48A. The intimate partnership of married life and love has been established by the Creator and qualified by His laws, and is rooted in the conjugal covenant irrevocable personal consent. Hence, by that human act whereby spouses mutually bestow and accept each other, a relationship arises, which, by divine will and in the eyes of society too, is a lasting one. For the good of the spouses and their offsprings, as well as of society, the existence of the sacred bond no longer depends on human decisions alone. For God himself is the author of matrimony, endowed as it is with various benefits and purposes. All of these have a very decisive bearing on the continuation of the human race, on the personal development and eternal destiny of the individual members of a family, and on the dignity, stability, peace, and prosperity of the family itself, and of human society as a whole. By their very nature, the institution of matrimony itself and conjugal love are ordained for the procreation and education of children, and find in them their ultimate crown. Thus a man and a woman, who by their compact of conjugal love are no longer two but one flesh, Matthew 19, render mutual help and service to each other through the intimate union of their persons and their actions. Through this union, they experience the meaning of their oneness and attain to it with growing perfection day by day. As a mutual gift of two persons, this intimate union and the good of the children impose total fidelity on the spouses and argue for an unbreakable oneness between them. That was a pretty long subparagraph. It starts talking about how God created marriage as an intimate partnership of love. This is that intimate partnership of love. It is created by God. It is built into human nature and into society. And the will of the spouses is what forms the marriage bond. It is, the husband's will to get married to the wife and the wife's will to get married to the husband that is a sacrament. Each one confers it on each other. And within this idea, God sets certain benefits to marriage. Then this looks at the ends of marriage. And that's a really important thing to note, that traditionally there are seen as 3 ends of marriage, 2 primary ones and 1 secondary one, which is not mentioned, which I'll mention here as well. So the biggest and first and primary end of marriage is directed towards kids, towards children, towards their education and procreation. And we need a long-term relationship to develop children's personality. We can see in our society how much parental divorce damages children. Even children who are teenagers or adults, it's most obvious when you have a little kid who's 2 or 3, and it's really hard to even afford to take care of that kid now with those type of things. But on the other hand, we still have that when we have adult children who, when their parents get divorced, they suffer all kinds of things. And that's an important part of personality. And it's also directed, secondly, which is also one of the primary ones, it's directed towards the love or union between the spouses. It helps them grow in perfection. It helps them grow towards the goodness. Now, not mentioned here, but traditionally considered a third end is what's called the remedy for concupiscence or otherwise. So basically, we as human beings have sexual tendencies, and we can very easily exercise these in sinful ways. And so this is the way to resolve that. Obviously, that's why it's the minor one, and it's not the one that's mentioned, because it's not really the key one. Moving on to B and C, they talk about how Jesus blesses with marriage and makes himself known through it. Let's read it. B. Christ the Lord abundantly blessed this many-faceted love, welling up as it does from the fountain of divine love, and structured as it is on the model of his union with his church. For as God of old made himself present to his people through a covenant of love and fidelity, so now the Savior of men and the spouse of the church comes into the lives of married Christians through the sacrament of matrimony. He abides with them thereafter, so that just as he loved the church and handed himself over to her on her behalf, the spouses may love each other with perpetual fidelity through mutual self-bestowal. C. Authentic married love is caught up into divine love and is governed and enriched by Christ's redeeming power and the saving activity of the church, so that this love may lead the spouse to God with powerful effect, and may aid and strengthen them in sublime office of being a father or a mother. For this reason, Christian spouses have a special sacrament, by which they are fortified and receive a kind of consecration in the duties and dignity of their state. By virtue of this sacrament, as spouses fulfill their conjugal and family obligation, they are penetrated with the Spirit of Christ, which suffers their whole lives with faith, hope, and charity. Thus, they increasingly advance the perfection of their own personalities, as well as their mutual sanctification, and hence contribute jointly to the glory of God. Jesus blessed marriage. He made it one of the 7 sacraments. This is how he comes to us in his divine love. He comes to us in the sacrament. He is present in marriage this way. And it's really interesting that C really gets into how authentic marital love leads to divine love. It is not just the love between husband and wife, but that love should be modeled on love for Christ and the church, the love of the Trinity. That is the kind of love we need to seek. How often do couples really strive to help their spouse become holy? And I don't mean being that kind of sacrifice you have to make and being annoying to your spouse. I'm sure a bunch of spouses do that accidentally. Hopefully spouses don't intentionally do that. Sometimes some spouses, you'll have like a husband who really likes dad jokes and the wife is just groaning and things like that. But there's other ways that are annoying that shouldn't be happening. And so that's part of marriage, is help your spouse become holy, help me lead them to heaven. And the sacrament helps them to fulfill their duties, helps them become more perfect, helps them to live the life that they're called to live in that regard. Now, our last subsection, or our last 2 subparagraphs today, are D and E. Parents need to love their children and children their parents. Let's read them. D. As a result, with their parents leading the way by example of family prayer, children, and indeed everyone gathered around the family hearth, will find a readier path to human maturity, salvation, and holiness. Graced with the dignity and office of fatherhood and motherhood, parents will energetically acquit themselves of a duty, which devolves primarily on them, namely education, especially religious education. E. As living members of the family, children contribute in their own way to making their parents holy, for they respond to the kindness of their parents with sentiments of gratitude, with love, and with trust. They will stand by them as children should when hardships overtake their parents or old age brings its loneliness. Widowhood, accepted bravely as a continuation of a marriage vocation, should be esteemed by all. Families, too, share in their spiritual riches generously with other families. Thus, the Christian family, which springs from marriage as a reflection of the loving covenant united Christ with the church, and as a participation in that covenant, will manifest to all men Christ's living presence in the world, and the genuine nature of the church. This the family will do by the mutual love of the spouses, by their generous fruitfulness, their solidarity and faithfulness, and by the loving way in which all members of their family assist one another. So, this subparagraph notes widowhood, and I think it would refer to both husband or wife who has their spouse die. Sometimes widowhood is just referring to women, because they'll call men widowers and widowerhood or something, but that is, I think, referring to both. What these two subparagraphs are talking about is the love between parents and children. And not just the love, but the way they work, right? So it starts with parents need to lead children with love. Love is a starting point. It's not just, hey, I'm in charge, I'm the parent, you listen to me. No. Good parenting begins with love. Begins by saying, I love this child. I want what's best for this child. I am striving to give this child what will lead them to holiness, what will lead them to virtue the most. And obviously, parents need to lead their children in spirituality and maturity and all those virtues. Now, E talks more about from the side of the children. They're an important part of the family. It's not just the husband and wife in marriage. They bring forth their children, and those children become part of the marriage. And what do? We respond to parental love with gratitude. We need to be grateful to our parents. We need to help our parents in old age. And oftentimes that help gets more when they're very sick, very old age, or if one passes away and the other one's a widow, there's a lot of that emotional helping, because if you're just alone and nobody talks to or nobody visits a widow, it's very difficult. It's much nicer if their sons and daughters come over and visit regularly. And finally, if we do all these things, if our family works in all these ways, it could be a sign of the love of the Trinity, a sign of the love of Jesus for the church. This is the ultimate destiny of a marriage consummated, lived as a sacrament, is that deep, abiding love for the church, that deep, abiding love of the family there, that leads to that sign of Jesus' love for all. This concludes today. Thank you for listening to this episode of Vatican II in a Year. This is a listener-supported podcast, and you can donate to help StarQuest produce it and other great podcasts at sqpn.com/give. You can give one-time, monthly, or join the StarQuest Patreon. Tomorrow, we will continue with the next paragraph of Gaudium et Spes. That will be paragraph 49 on marriage in the Bible. Please join us then to learn more about Vatican II, which can provide a blueprint for the Catholic Church. If you want more information on the podcast, like playlists for each document and a reading plan, go to sqpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewlc.com/Vatican, or Vatican SQPN on Facebook and X.
Amen.